Good morning and welcome to our dementia-friendly Fairfax webinar series, Recognizing Caregiver Burnout. This is our fourth webinar in our four-part series, so we're so excited that you are joining us today for the webinar. Dementia-friendly Fairfax is an initiative started in July of 2019 through a partnership with Goodwin House, Insight Memory Care Center, and Fairfax County. Dementia-friendly Fairfax envisions our community as a place where people living with dementia and their care partners will be able to engage in activities, be supported in the highest quality of life, and can live independently for as long as possible. If you are looking to get more involved with Dementia Friendly Fairfax or the initiative as a whole, there will be a link at the end of this webinar to learn more information on the Insight website. And now I would like to introduce your trainer for today, Marquita Brown. Marquita is the Outreach Coordinator at Insight Memory Care Center. Marquita holds a Master of Social Work and has extensive knowledge and experience advocating, motivating, and counseling individuals with disabilities, mental illness, and substance abuse disorders. She is a certified Share for Dementia counselor. Now I will turn it over to Marquita and let her start the webinar. Thank you. Marquita, you are muted.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Robin, for the introduction. And I'm just appreciate, you all being here with us today. What we're going to be talking about is recognizing caregiver burnout. And so we hope that today that you will learn a lot of things in reference to how to recognize it and what you can do to kind of combat this prevalent issue that often happens when you're in the midst of caregiving. Okay, so as a few housekeeping tips, attendees are in listening only mode. And because of that, we ask that any questions that you have, if you could please go ahead and put them into the questions box. We do have someone moderating that, and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. So you may open and close your control panel if it is at any point distracting to you, and you can join via audio. And then you can submit questions, as said before, to the panel, and we will answer those at the end. We will download, you're able to access handouts in the panel that says handouts. There are two handouts that we will be looking at, and one is a caregiver quiz. The other one is actually the presentation, if you'd like to have that afterwards. And then registered attendees will receive a link for recording afterwards. Okay, so in reference to caregivers, what we're going to do is we're going to explain who they are and some statistics in reference to it. But a caregiver is a person who provides the excuse me, my computer is kind of acting up. Sorry about that. But basically, they provide needs for a person who is ill and has a chronic or disabling condition. And so with that being said, a lot of times we have things happening in the background. And so we want to be able to focus on the needs of individuals that are caregiving. Sorry, my computer is frozen, so hold on one second. Bear with me. All right, so usually these caregivers are a lot of times unpaid. They're usually family members, friends, or partners or neighbors that are usually in the midst of doing this caregiving. And also, in addition to that, I'm not sure why this keeps on freezing up, so I apologize. But it may be they might be the primary or secondary caregiver in the situation. They may or may not live with the care recipient. And so I'll go over some caregiver statistics. And over 34 million Americans provide unpaid care. And so you think about the significance of the actual need for caregiving. That's a lot, because it accounts for over 6 million in care, particularly with somebody with dementia. And so 4,200 unpaid caregivers in Virginia provide about 526 million hours of care with a person with dementia. And so that's actually valued at $6.6 billion. And so as you can see, the significant need in reference to caregiving just in this state alone is very big. And some more statistics, 75% of all caregivers are women, and on average, 24.5 hours a week of providing care is accosted to the caregivers if they were being paid. And also in the duration of the caregiver roles, it's approximately 4 years, but individuals that actually have been in this journey of caregiving, we know that it can actually extend way beyond 4 years. And so in reference to that, 75% of caregivers usually reside about 20 minutes or more away from their caregiver recipient. Okay, so when we look at this word cloud, there's a lot of things that can be associated with caregiving when we talk about this particular and prevalent topic. There can be anxiety, frustration, grief. You also think about worry. There's different people in different socioeconomic statuses that may be impacted differently. There's a variety of different things that may be thought of when it comes to caregiving. And just to break down some statistics in terms of race and ethnicity, individual adult caregiving in the United States is identified in this breakdown. So 62% of caregivers are identified as white. African American runs about 13%. Hispanic actually are around 17%, and then Asian Americans are about around 6%, and that's what they identify with. And so with that being said, a lot of times having the breakdown, they may not view in certain cultures the caregiving that they're doing in terms of what it is and how they care for themselves as they are doing the task of caregiving. But just having some statistics just to give you is very important in reference to when you're engaging with people that may come from different backgrounds and carrying out this task. So what I want to do next is we're going to do a caregiving quiz. And so with the caregiving quiz, this is actually compliments of AARP, and I thought it was a really important quiz to do. And so if you could, if you have something like a pencil and paper to be able to do this, we're going to do some calculations lightly. And with the caregiver quiz, it actually has about 10 items, 10, 15 items or so. And for each item, what I'm going to have you to do is score the item on a scale from 1 through 7. Of course, that's listed here, but 1 is never, 2 is once or twice, 3 is rarely, 4 is sometimes, 5 is often, 6 usually, and 7 always. And so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to go ahead and get a pencil and paper because you will be adding this stuff together. All right, we'll give a few more seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started with the quiz. And this is also one of the handouts in the section that is categorized as handouts on your panel. All right, so in reference to caring for your loved one, how often do you have the following experiences? The first one is feeling resentful. And with that, I want you to scale that from 1 to 7. Number 2, how often do you feel trapped? And please answer that on a scale from 1 to 7. The next one is, how often do you begin feeling tired and you don't feel like you have enough sleep? Please answer that with the numeric 1 through 7. How often do you experience feeling weary? The next one is feeling troubled. Please rate from 1 to 7. The next is, how often do you experience feeling helpless? Please rate from 1 to 7. How often have you experienced poor appetite or overeating? Please rate from 1 through 7. The next one is, how often do you experience being physically exhausted? Please rate from 1 through 7. The next one is, how often have you experienced being disillusioned? Please rate from 1 to 7. The next is, how often have you experienced feeling useless? Please rate from 1 through 7. The next is being utterly drained of feeling. Please rate from 1 to 7. And we're going into the last 4. The next one is, how often have you experienced feeling burned out? The next one is being unhappy. Please rate on a scale from 1 through 7. The next is, how often have you experienced feeling anxious? Please rate from 1 to 7. And the last is feeling rejected. Please rate on a scale from 1 to 7. And so as you're finishing up rating each of those items, you should add them up, and then we will proceed to going to the results based on your additions for this particular exercise. And just as a check, you should have 15 numbers. All right, I'll give you a few more seconds to go ahead and tally that up. I know that it may take a while since it's about 15. So in a second, what we'll do is we'll look at the results. You can continue to tally those up, and then we'll do a poll in connection to this caregiving quiz. All right, So in reference to your results, for anyone that scored under 60, you're in good shape according to this AARP caregiving quiz. And so the next section, if your score is 60 or above, it says according to this quiz that the stress of caregiving is taking a toll on you, and you may at some point want to seek help. If it's 90 and above, you're living in caregiver burnout. And wherever you land in terms of these results, you're not alone, because a study that was conducted in the National Alliance Caregiving and AARP found that more than half of those who provide major care for their parents or their loved ones with dementia, so this is 1 in 4 that provide any type of care, experience stress and strain. So you're definitely not alone. And prolonged stress actually can have serious physical and emotional consequences. And so what we're going to do is we are going to now have a poll. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to go ahead and calculate those things, because what we're going to do is start the poll. Hold on one second. All right. And so we want to ask in the poll of the audience, is your caregiver's quiz score under 60, 60 to 89, or 90 and above? So I see some responses being collected. Thank you so much. We have about 67% that is voted. And for anybody that's hesitant, we want you to know that it won't come up who put in whatever response. We just want to kind of get a feel as a talking point to move further in the presentation. All right, we're almost there at 78%. Is there anyone else that would like to put in their responses? All right, we'll go ahead and close it in just a few. All right, here we go. So I will go ahead and share those results. And according to everyone that's in attendance, about 63% are under 60, which is great. Some people may be here in reference to a loved one, a neighbor, someone else that's outside of their family, so that's great. And this can also be applied to caregiving for someone outside of someone that's diagnosed with dementia. And so 38%, excuse me, said that they were in a range of 60 to 98, 89%, excuse me. And so I see that some people, they're, according to their scores, or they're in a place that, you know, they have some stressors, which is definitely understandable with the COVID-19 situation. If you didn't have stress, I'm sure you have some of it now. And so thank you all for participating in this particular survey. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right.
Hey, Marquita, I just wanted to let you know we got a question that I think is pretty relevant if you want to take it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sure. So the question is, how do you encourage someone else who you think may be experiencing caregiver burnout to realize it?
Okay, that's a great question. So the first thing that I would suggest in terms of that is just basically just being there for the person. Sometimes when we're in a state of experiencing caregiver burnout, as I will explain later on in the presentation, people are at a place where they're not really tracking as much in terms of their own well-being and maybe safety. And so what I usually do if I see someone that seems to be having some concerns, I ask them how they're doing. Try to get a feel of, what they'll share with you, and just say, in my observations, I have seen X, Y, and Z. So in that way, you're just expressing what you've seen in that person. And with that, they may kind of, let their guard down, because a lot of times when we're experiencing any type of caregiving situation, it's tunnel vision just in the sake of getting things done. And so just letting you know that you're there, you're noticing some changes, and you want to help is the best way to allow someone to let you in and be able to help them. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you so much, Robin. All right, so the next section we'll go to is, what is caregiver burnout? So caregiver burnout is basically described as a state of physical, emotional, mental exhaustion that can be accompanied by a change in attitude. And this attitude is usually from a positive and caring to a negative and unconcerned kind of disposition. And so burnout can happen when caregivers don't really get what they need in terms of, filling themselves up in self-care, and they're trying to accomplish more than they're able to physically, maybe emotionally, financially, because as it becomes a continuous 24/7 type of job, particularly for the individuals that are living with their loved ones that have dementia, it can be very taxing on a person. And so just, trying to be mindful if you see other people, again, just to help them if possible, in what they will allow you to do, because sometimes help can be, you think it's helpful, but sometimes it could be in a place where, because they're so overwhelmed, it may be more of a burden. And so being able to have that conversation, I noticed this, is there anything that I can do to help? Maybe something that'd be beneficial for someone experiencing caregiver burnout. So many caregivers, naturally, they feel guilty if they spend time on themselves. And unfortunately, this causes them to have more significant, you know, concerns in terms of taking care of their loved one. What I like to say to individuals is, if you're not taking care of yourself, you may be impacting the care that you're providing to your loved one. But it's easier said than done when there's all these things that have to be done in a day. And so I definitely understand that. So in some more statistics in terms of caregiver burnout, 40 million family caregivers provide 37 billion hours of care for their loved ones. So this is actually on a national level, where before we were talking about just the state of Virginia. So this care is actually estimated at 470 billion, which is an insurmountable amount of time that and money that is spent in terms of caregiver burnout. And knowing that there's 20% of adult children taking care of their older parents, and about 85% of family care in the US that doesn't receive any respite care, you can see the need, and it's very significant. In addition to that, nearly half of the caregivers are having trouble balancing their work if they're working, and their caregiving. And work may actually be just the ins and outs and day-to-day activities that you have to do. And so just being mindful of those things as you're addressing someone that you may want to support, will be very pertinent in your conversations. So, and some more statistics, but shifting over to dementia caregivers, and specifically 35% of those caregivers report that their health has gotten worse due to their care responsibilities. And this is really important because statistics also show that individuals that care for loved ones with dementia have a hard time with balancing that self-care can potentially worsen and die before their loved one with dementia because the stress is so insurmountable that they're not able to manage. And as a result, that stress will cause physical, mental, and emotional impacts that have to be accounted for when caring for a loved one. Then also compared to caregivers with people without dementia, the ones that do are twice as much impacted for the realms of emotional, physical, and financial difficulties because the sheer volume of care that is needed for addressing a loved one with dementia. Those caregivers have higher levels of depression, stress, frustration, and they have increased risk of harmful behaviors that worsen their health simply because they may not have the strategies and coping skills to be able to assist their loved one. And this unfortunately increases challenges that unfortunately don't go addressed. And so this is the reason why this usually happens, because this care associated with dementia care is heavily involved with ADLs and IADLs, which may not be an issue that is with other people that are caregiving. And so they face increased emotional and psychological challenges due to the difficulty of care that they have to provide their loved one. So the next question is, are you experiencing caregiver burnout? And as we go through this, I'll explain some of the things about why this may happen, and we'll kind of go into the different stages of caregiver burnout. All right. So a lot of times with caregiver burnout, caregivers have multiple roles. This has been spoken about in the other part of the series, so I'll just mention it, how sometimes the caregiver has to be a care provider, a care coordinator, a medical and financial informational resource, advocate, emotional support. And because of this, it can make it very challenging for the person to manage everything at once. And so with that being said, we'll kind of go into the 4 stages of caregiver burnout in hopes that we can identify it if anybody's experiencing it, whether it being yourself or someone that you know, and how we can get the person help. So in the 4 stages of caregiver burnout, the first stage is the physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. So at this stage, you may be able, or that person may be able to hold it together in social environments. They're experiencing the stress, but at this point, they're still being able to function at work, at home, in school, whatever they may be doing, and at home as well. But in the second stage, shame and doubt maybe is prominent at this point. And so a lot of times that individual may not be feeling confident, and they may start discounting past accomplishments, because as we know, as a caregiver for a loved one that has dementia, it seems as soon as you get a good flow, something progresses, something declines, and then you're not feeling as confident as you were before. And then at this point, in terms of your support systems, they may start to notice a significant change in you. If you're typically, for example, upbeat type of person, there may be some shifts where, you're maybe not keeping yourself up as much as possible, or as you usually do. You may not be your jovial self. And so at this point, a lot of times people start to notice in your immediate circles. The next stage is where cynicism and callousness starts to arise. And a lot of times in our support groups, we talk about this. Sometimes we may adapt a dark humor that someone on the outside may kind of look at you strange. And this is sometimes in response to, you know, an insecurity or a vulnerability, just wanting to be the best in terms of caring for your loved one, but really are held down by the weight of the caregiving at this point. And so some maladaptive coping strategies may come in place, you know, it may be overindulging in alcohol. It may be doing things like, you know, drowning yourself in TV or secluding yourself from family and friends. And it's from self-preservation, because things that would usually help you in reference to, you know, interacting and talking with people, it may become overwhelming just engaging with folks, because your mind may be, you know, thinking about so many other things, just for a sake of example. Before the fourth stage and the final stage, this is a stage where it really has some things connected to you feeling failure, helpless, and you may actually be in crisis. And so at this point, you know, your means to cope really become unglued. Your ability to function may not be in a place where you can even care for your loved one at this point, and you may feel like you're falling apart at the seams. And so when we get to the place, unfortunately, where some caregivers are exhibiting those type of things, it really is going to be pertinent for outsiders that see these things to intervene and provide help where possible. All right, so the next group exercise, if I was doing this in person, what I would do is I would have people kind of split up and, you know, kind of be in a place to show, you know, where they were in terms of this continuum. However, we'll do it a little differently today. And so I'm going to have a poll that I do, and hold on one second while I pull that up. But with this poll, what I wanted to ask was, for the folks that identify individuals that are feeling some type of caregiver burnout, or you know someone that is, what stage do you feel like they're in based upon what I've just shared with you in terms of the information of the stages of caregiver burnout? So I'm about to launch it. And if you could, if you know someone that is experiencing caregiver burnout, which stage resonates with their situation most? Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4? All right, so thank you all for tallying some things in. I see that we got about 44% of the folks that are attending that have voted. And if you feel like someone may be in between those two stages, you can just check the one that most closely connects that what you're seeing. So we got a little bit over half of responses in, so we'll wait a little while longer to see if anyone wants to chime in. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that poll. All right, so in terms of the results, based on what you've seen, it looks like either yourself or the person that you know. Most of them are in the stage of, physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, which is great that if you're here, hopefully it's in a place just to, kind of educate yourself and just really know that, okay, I have to be mindful of these things. Now, there is 20% that did mention that they've seen either within themselves or the people that they know some cynicism and callousness. And so, again, if there's anyone that has questions about how to navigate in these various stages, we are all at Insight are welcome to helping you through our consultations. They're free of charge. And then we also have other resources where we'll talk about later on, so you can be able to have the support and resources that you need. So let me share my slides again. All right. I'm sorry. For some reason, it keeps on freezing, but when technology has its challenges, you just keep on moving forward. So hold on just 1 second. All right. So thank you so much for bearing with me. So we'll talk about next what factors contribute to caregiver burnout. All right. So caregivers, again, as I mentioned, they take on multiple tasks. And so I've talked about these before, being the care provider, the coordinator, the medical and financial information resource, advocate, emotional supporter, and we also wear other hats as a caregiver. And so for that reason, it's just very being mindful of the things that you're taking on, seeing the things that you can delegate will really become important. So how caregiving affects you. And with this part, I'll share a story about how a glass of water may seem heavy at first, or not heavy at first. And so if you can imagine, if you raise a glass of water, everyone would expect to say, if it's 8 ounces, it's not heavy. If you look at a glass and over time you're holding it, it doesn't seem to be an issue. However, over time, as you continue to hold up a glass in your hand, you may experience aches and pains. You may ignore it for a little while, but if you continue to hold it for an hour, that it may start to feel numb in terms of your hand. And then at some point, it may become paralyzing. And so if you think of the importance of gauging how you carry things in reference to this glass of water that you hold in your hand, if you can envision it, you can kind of see how caregiving can affect you. And at some point, if you keep your hand held up long enough, it's going to be so hard to hold it as it becomes heavier and heavier. And it may be to the fact that you can't hold it anymore. And so when we talk about, a glass of water and kind of translating it to caregiving, we have to be mindful of the stress that is experienced while you're caring for a loved one, because we don't want to be in a place that we're carrying it all day and all night and everywhere we go, because when we do that, a lot of times it can be more than you and then the people around you can bear, because it impacts other people too, to see you and wanting to help you or your loved one, or the person that if you're on the outside. It's hard to see someone struggling, especially when you want to help. And so we just wanted to kind of take that aside and talk about that in particularly, because it's really important when it comes to just being in a place to see how the effects can really manifest in a way that doesn't seem like it's a big deal at first, but over time it just kind of snowballs. So, risk associated with dementia caregiving. Of course, as I've probably already spoken about earlier, there's physical, social, psychological, and financial risk. And so a lot of times, as we've already mentioned, there's a risk of health problems for the caregiver. There may be social isolation that happens. Caregivers will have potentially an increase of depression if it's not constantly monitored, in terms of how you're functioning every day. And of course, because of the cost of care and sometimes loss of wages, those are the risks that can be associated with dementia caregiving for the caregivers that provide those services that are unpaid to the people that they love. So signs and symptoms of the stress may include feeling of being overwhelmed, exhausted, alone. Sometimes there's anger that comes about in the frustration, because you're trying to communicate with your loved one and you're not able to do so. And because of this, there's anxiety that can build. There's loss of concentration. Because of everything that goes on, you may be experiencing sleepless nights, and things of that nature, having insomnia, weight changes, body aches, the whole 9 yards. And sometimes, like I said before, there may be, for some individuals, in a desperate need of trying to cope, there may be some other harmful behaviors that actually happen in reference to that. And because of the demands on the body, and how overwhelming the process can be, not only can it lead to fatigue and hopelessness, burnout is ultimately a very real thing for individuals. And so other factors can include role confusion. And sometimes when we talk about role confusion, we're looking at that in a sense of being thrusted into the role as a caregiver. And it can be difficult to separate those roles, if you're a spouse or if you're a child and you have to transition between the roles as a caregiver. Sometimes it's difficult. In terms of unrealistic expectations, people may expect things of you, as an outsider looking in, other family members or friends. And again, they may be meaning to be helpful, but it may not be helping in the situation. And because it's a progressive disease, sometimes our expectations for ourselves can be a barrier, in the sense of we're trying to do all that we can and we are sometimes limited in the things that we can do. Of course, many caregivers, they become frustrated by the lack of money, resources, skills that they need to effectively care for their loved one. And managing those things can be a burden for the loved one's care. Unreasonable demands. And sometimes these can be on ourselves, as I mentioned before, and sometimes it can be outsiders. For instance, let's just say you have a neighbor that you help and they're experiencing symptoms of dementia. and maybe an uncomfortable situation happens and they need help with toileting. And as a neighbor, that's just not a line that you want to cross. Sometimes there can be unreasonable demands. For instance, if there's a weight differential for your loved one that you're helping, let's just say you may be slender in build, but your loved one is significantly different in terms of size, in terms of transporting them and things of that nature, that may be a difficult thing. It may be that you're uncomfortable as a child of a parent with dementia. And so those things come up as examples in terms of unreasonable demands. And so as in other factors, many caregivers cannot recognize when they're suffering burnout, and eventually they get to a point where they cannot function effectively and they may become sick themselves. And so those are some things that we kind of take a look at in terms of caregiver burnout, in terms of the factors that lead to these this unfortunate situation of caregiver burnout. So again, we talk about symptoms, and they include, in terms of stress and depression, withdrawal from friends and family and loved ones, loss of interest in activities previously enjoyed. You may feel blue. You may have appetite changes, sleep pattern changes. We've talked about these. You may get sick more often. And then, irritability comes up. We've talked about these things throughout, and you can refer to this list, but it's just very pertinent to keep these things in mind in terms of symptoms as you see people maybe experiencing some mental health concerns, and maybe helping them to the question that was asked before to give them help. And this is a source from the Cleveland Clinic in terms of these symptoms. Okay, so all in all, as caregivers, we want to focus on the loved one that we're caring for, but we don't want to do it at the expense of our own well-being. So it's crucial to take care of ourselves and commit to having a life outside of the caregiving role. And that may be, sometimes we can laugh and say, yeah, that's not possible, but we want to make sure that we're doing that at all costs. So this quote says, self-care is not selfish. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. And so it's so important for you to continue to fill yourself with meaningful things in your life. The most important rule for caregiving and self-care, like they say on the plane, put your mask on before you go to help someone else. And again, this is a lot of times what I share with individuals that I talk to, particularly when they're in the situation where they feel like they're the only one, or they're the sole, caregiver for that person. And if something happens to me, what's going to become of my loved one? And that's what I try to, talk to individuals about. It says because of that scenario, it is so important for you to be in a place to, take the stigma of, taking care of yourself, throw it out the window, and know that, you can take care of yourself and not feel guilty about that and taking care of your loved one, because it's essential. Okay, so what can you do to combat caregiver burnout? This is the good stuff. And so you want to definitely make sure that you're identifying the sources of stress early. Those things can change over time, but in that, the ways you can deal with it is have fun. Laughter is the best medicine, and there's studies that show that laughter has actually helped people be cured of, incurable diseases. Just changing your outlook makes a difference. So have fun, eat well, get enough sleep. And studies have also shown that people that don't get the adequate amount of sleep, 7 to 8 hours, they can cut off to 10 to 15 years off their lives. And the reason why that is because on a biological level, your body, when it sleeps, it's renewing, cells on a cellular level. A lot of things are occurring at this point. And, free radicals, the things we always hear, we're talking about health, those things happen. So if you're not doing that, it can definitely impact your health on a whole. Find spiritual outlets, whatever you connect to, whether it be, your church, your synagogue, mass, whatever it is that you're connected to, your temple, or meditation, going out in nature, whatever it is for you, just making sure you're keeping those outlets is going to be very important. And also getting counseling. It's okay that as you're trying to process to get it out, sometimes people say a good cry helps to kind of help you process and get things out. So when you're addressing personal stress, it really becomes important to do those things to keep yourself balanced and whole. You also want to find a doctor that'll listen to you and help you kind of navigate sometimes uncharted territory. And you have to commit not only to your loved one, but to your own healthy lifestyle. If you see something that's, maybe concerning in terms of your health, extra frustration that you can't seem to manage, symptoms of depression, anxiety, go ahead and make sure that you're checking in with your doctor regularly as those things pop up, and understand that grief is not unusual, because with dementia particularly, there's what we call the grief of the first missing of your loved one, how they used to be. And then as they progress, you miss just the interactions and things of that nature. So it's something to keep mindful of as you continue to walk through this journey. So again, there's nothing in reference to a perfect caregiver that you need to hold on to. So anyone that was looking for the trophy for perfect caregiving, just throw it out the window. And I say this just joking, but just sometimes we have to give up our own expectations of what it should look like, and just kind of take it day by day and admit that you need help and accept it. Sometimes you may not know what it looks like, but just making sure that you're taking the time to provide rest to yourself, just sharpening your skills by being here to develop different coping strategies. That's going to become important. Making sure you take breaks to improve your health. If you need to leave the room for whatever reason, make sure that you're doing that. Having activities that are not related to caregiving, those things are all important. In terms of respite, if you need that, definitely seek it out. It could be family members or friends, home care agencies. It could be adult day center, assistant living. Some of them, for at least 2 days, 2 weeks. Everyone has a different expectation. And I know it's probably harder with the COVID-19 situation to utilize some of these. However, Fairfax County, you live in a great county, and they have traditional and volunteer respite programs as well. And so in reference to ideas to keep your loved one active, again, some of these have been mentioned already, but adult day centers, memory cafes, Parkinson cafes, a lot of these are virtual now. Exercise classes, again, virtual. In-home therapies, volunteering with your faith community, if you're connected to one, the Shepherd Center, there's village networks, there's many things in this particular county in which I have to put in a plug. They have really done a lot of things in having inroads to the different resources in comparison to neighboring counties. And so you can have friends, a family visit. You can give your loved one failure-free household tasks. They can fold towels. They can help set the table, things of that nature to keep them engaged, continuing to communicate with them all the while as they're able and participating and engaging in activities together become really important. And also lifelong learning centers, senior centers, things of that nature will be good to consider as things are going online. Okay, so in reference to tips for relieving stress while taking care of your loved one, again, ask for help. And we reiterate some of these things because it's so important to hear it again and hear it again, because sometimes we can get very isolatory in our caregiving tasks. But we want to be social, physically active, adopt healthy lifestyles, tell your healthcare provider that you are caregiving. Find ways to refill your tank as much as possible. Include some of your favorites throughout the day, whether it be music, whether it be art, whether it be just taking a walk and being in nature, and find a little humor in the day. In terms of looking for classes for caregivers, as you know, Insight Memory Care Center, we provide things on a monthly basis. We have different seminars for caregiving, and as this series also is available, there are also things available at community centers and senior centers with Fairfax County, with different faith-based communities. They provide things as well. Senior living communities, lifelong learning programs like this webinar, phone-based classes. We have publications in this particular county, like the Beacon, Fairfax County, Caregivers Corner, and then the Golden Gazette. They're all online, but they also send them out if you prefer reading those. But just making sure that you have access and you know about these things. So in terms of different supports, in-person groups, again, Insight Memory Care Center are providing virtual options. The Alzheimer's Association, the Shepherd Center, that's in Fairfax County, senior living communities, faith communities. We have telephone supports, online groups like Facebook and different things of that nature, also message boards. All right, and so as we wrap up, we want to make sure we evaluate personal needs and preferences. We're developing a plan that fits the conditions, and we want to make sure that we were renewing and reviewing those things periodically as things change. If you want to develop a plan for future needs, we do have a program called the SHARE program for those that are in early stage dementia, and we are able to help with legal, financial planning, documentation, how preferences will be impacted, why your loved one can still be able to articulate their concerns in reference to that. So as some resources, of course, Insight Memory Care Center is a place that you can be. Fairfax County Caregiver Support Program is a great program. And then AARP has a booklet called Prepared to Care Guide. And so they have some great resources that are available. I also wanted to mention another one from Fairfax County, hot off the press. I wanted to make sure I gave it to you. It's called the COVID Support Warm Line. And so it's basically through DBHDS. It's in Mental Health America it's like a warm support and emotional support line for individuals that are struggling with the COVID-19 situation, and just to be able to connect with folks as they're struggling. And that number is 877-349-6428. And if you have any questions, please feel free in terms of the warm line, because I just received that and I didn't have time to add it into the slideshow. However, if you need that, please feel free to let us know and we'll get that over to you. But in closing, just want to leave some things with you as something to think about in terms of what I call the meditations from the quote corner, because I love quotes. It says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. The next one is, it always seems impossible until it's done. The next one is, tough times never last, but tough people do. And the last one is, when you come to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. And so I just wanted to share those with you as my last words, because there's various things that you can use to kind of help you to hold on for sometimes 1 second longer, sometimes 1 day longer, and so on and so forth. But with that being said, I thank you all for joining us today. At Insight, we do have a 3-prong approach in terms to our programming. We provide care, education, and support to individuals in the community that need support for themselves and also for their loved ones. So everything is kind of highlighted on this slide, which is included in your handouts. And so please feel free to join us in upcoming events. All of the links are there. If you're interested in learning more about Dementia Friendly Fairfax, please visit that website or URL. And then if you could, just make sure you complete the evaluation you receive after today's session. Any feedback that you can provide us, we're always looking to learn and grow from our patrons that we provide services from. So again, my name is Marquita Brown. We thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach me or give us a call. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And an additional thanks I always like to add to the resilient caregivers that strive to provide the quality of care for their loved ones. So if there's any questions, I'll turn it over to Robin.
Hi, Marquita. We do not have any additional questions, and we have not received any, so I think this would conclude, if you're good.
All righty.
Yeah, so thank you all so much for taking part in this webinar today, and it concludes our 4-part webinar series. And again, feel free to go to Insight's website. We have lots of resources there to learn more about Dementia Friendly. Just go to insightmcc.org/dementia friendly, and you'll find a lot more information. Thank you so much, and please fill out the survey. Have a great day.